device that is actually keeping time. Maybe you have a watch, or maybe you have a cell phone, or maybe more than one of those things. And the question is, are these things our friends, or are they our enemies? Have you ever thought about it? Is the clock your friend or your enemy? Well, yeah, I hear some of you saying it depends. And let's face it, if we didn't have some type of timepiece, it's likely none of us would be back at this time, right? But I don't know if you've noticed this. It seems like we reach a certain age in life where people wish these timepieces would go backwards. Are you following along with me? It may be not the minutes, but at least the hours or the weeks or the years. And here's the question that I've got for you today. Is it possible to be able to turn back the clock when it comes to some of the conditions that are often associated with aging? What do you think? Can you turn back the clock? Well, the evidence suggests that to some extent you can, and the science, one of the sciences that speaks about this is something called hemorheology. Now, if you've not heard of hemorheology, that's okay, because we're going to talk about it in the next hour. Hemorheology, if you were to look into a medical dictionary, you'd find definitions like these: the science of the physical properties of blood flow in the circulatory system. If that doesn't sound scholarly enough, how about this one? The science of the relation of pressures, flow, volumes, and resistances in blood vessels. You say, well, what does all that mean? Hemorheology, if you really think about it, is pretty simple. Hemo refers to what? Blood. And rheology, do any of you know what rheology refers to? You know, logos refers to the study of something. But rheology has to do with the science dealing with the flow properties of complex substances. Now, I've been told that civil engineers study rheology when it comes to eliminating wastewater from a community, okay? Because this is a complex fluid. It's not just water, right? You following along with me? So hemorheology is the science of blood fluidity, and that's what we're going to talk about. It really has to do with the red blood cell. I'll tell you a true story. Some years ago, I was invited to give a series of lectures in the country of Italy. We were all the way down in South Italy to all the way up in Northern Italy, giving lectures through a number of places in that country. And at one stage of our travels, we had rented one of those small Italian cars. And I was driving in one of those old roads in one of those old villages, and as I was driving along, my superior powers of depth perception said to me, if I keep driving down that road, either the buildings will be spread apart by my car or my car will be damaged. What do you think was more likely to happen of those two scenarios? That's right, the car would have been damaged. So no room to make a 3-point turn. I guess I could have probably made a 29-point turn, but I decided just to back straight out. Now, what was the problem? Why could that car not go down that road? Yeah, you say it's obvious. The car was wider than the width of the road. You say, well, what does all this have to do with your blood circulation? Well, the red blood cells are like the cars in your body. They're carrying oxygen, carbon dioxide, bringing good things to your tissues, removing bad things from the tissues, if you will. And here's the question for you. What percentage clearance is there? How much space is there between the red blood cell wall and the smallest blood vessels? Do any of you know the answer? By the way, it's a trick question. The width of the red blood cell is over twice as wide as the smallest capillary. You say, well, then how can the red blood cell get through those tiny capillaries? Do any of you know? You see the picture there? The red blood cell has a very interesting shape. We call it a biconcave disc. You say, well, what does that mean? I sometimes tell people it's like a donut. But instead of having a hole in the middle, it has a thinner area. What it allows the red blood cell to do is to fold over on itself and squeeze through the capillaries. This is actually an amazing design because this optimizes contact between the red blood cell and your blood vessel walls. So when I look at that, I say, wow, that shows evidence of a creator who designed these red blood cells. But here's the problem. If those red blood cells get stiff, what do you think will happen? That's right, they can't get through those tiny capillaries. They'll back up. If the red blood cells clump together, they aggregate, what will happen? Can't get through those tiny capillaries. What I'm telling you about is there's all kinds of things that can affect the ability of the red blood cells to flow through your blood vessels. The better they flow, the better your health. So if we were to put hemorheology very simply, short phrase, I would describe it as the science that describes how effectively blood flows throughout your body, nourishing your tissues and eliminating wastes. So why is hemorheology important? Well, there was a wise health writer many years ago. Some of you may have heard of this individual, E.G. White. And this author wrote these words: perfect health requires a perfect circulation. Now, I'm sure people, when they read this statement written over 100 years ago, they said, oh, what nice poetry, right? This is cutting-edge medical science. It's the medical science known as what? Do any of you know the name? Hemorheology. I see some of you are struggling with that. Either you're struggling with the questions I'm asking or you haven't learned the name hemorheology. So I'm going to make it easy for you. Because I have given whole lectures. I've given actually lectures to doctors. Once I gave 6 hours of medical lectures on hemorheology to physicians about how important it is for taking care of our patients. So I'm going to make it easy for you because some of you are going to leave here. It's very possible you're going to say, oh, that was amazing. I learned such amazing stuff. You're going to call your friend. You can say, you should have been here at our church. I invited you. By the way, it's not too late to invite someone who's 10 or 15 minutes away. They can still, say, hey, there's room. There's still seats here. We thought it would be full house. We didn't think you'd want to stand up, but there's still some seats. You can invite them over. But here's where I'm going with this. You call them up. They didn't come. And you say, it was an amazing lecture. They say, what was it about? You say, oh, it was about it'd be embarrassing, right? If you were excited about a lecture and you couldn't even describe what was it about. So instead of calling it hemorheology, I'm going to give you permission to call it the Methuselah factor. Methuselah, the Methuselah factor. Who knows who Methuselah was? That's right, he was the longest lived person on this planet. You remember how long he lived? That's right, 969 years. Isn't that amazing? Now here's the thing. Do we have any lab work on Methuselah? Do we? No blood work. Nothing in the Bible about his cholesterol or fibrinogen or von Willebrand factor. Someone you think has a point, an answer to this? Yes. So let me come to this. So she's trying to help me here. Say, Dr. Derose, make this plain. What does Methuselah factor have to do with hemorheology? What I'm saying is we know that because of Methuselah's long life, he had to have good hemorheology. So one of the things that helped him live long was good hemorheology, so I call it the Methuselah factor. It's just my name for it, something that can give you health and vitality into your later years. So I call it the Methuselah factor. It's just my synonym for hemorheology, okay? Are we on the same page now? Good, thank you for that insightful question. So you say, well, what all does that have to do with anything? Make it plain for me, Dr. Derose. Well, I know some of you have a copy of my book called, not surprisingly, maybe in light of this lecture, The Methuselah Factor. In fact, I was told that actually one of you volunteered that on your way out. A couple other people, when they were talking with me about coming, said, oh, we've read The Methuselah Factor. So that's what we're talking about. We'll try to give you the high points so you don't have to feel you got to buy the book. And I'll tell you another secret that'll save you the price of the book as well. But we're going to talk about some of the things in the book, so we'll try to give you an overview. The first 12, 13 chapters of the book, we talk about all the reasons that the Methuselah factor is important. It's not all of them, but selected examples, and they're found on a single table. Figure 1 right there. For those of you that brought your binoculars, you should have no problem reading it. But seeing that most of you look like you didn't come prepared, I have enlarged figure 1. These are a number of the things that are associated with a better Methuselah factor. If you have better blood fluidity, you will have less what? Let's take a look at the list. You'll have less risk of stroke. The better your blood fluidity, the less likely you are to have a heart attack or other problems with coronary artery disease. What's even more surprising to many people is if you want to preserve your vision, one of the most important things you can do is have good blood fluidity. By the way, do any of you know the leading cause of vision loss in adults? Here in the U.S., if someone loses, if you have a friend who lost their vision in their 50s, what likely was the reason for it? That's exactly right. Diabetes is the leading cause of vision loss. If you never have diabetes and you lose your vision, what are two of the other top causes of vision loss? Do you know what they are? They're right up there, glaucoma and macular degeneration. So here's the deal. Diabetes, macular degeneration, glaucoma, all of them, you lower your risk of all of them if you improve your blood fluidity. Cancer is even associated with blood fluidity. We'll talk a little bit about that. Better blood fluidity, less risk, and some of the research of if you've had a cancer, less risk of dying from it if your blood fluidity is better. We'll talk a little bit about that. Cognitive decline. How many of you feel like you are so intellectually superior to your peers that it would be okay if you lost some of your mental acumen? How many of you feel like it would kind of level the playing field? Any of you thinking you're hoping you'll have some cognitive decline? Because that's a dumb question, Dr. Derose. Well, of course. All of us want to be as sharp as we can, right? And so if you want to have the best brain function, you want to have the best what? You're catching on. The correct answer was either Methuselah factor, hemorrheology, or blood fluidity. Yeah, all synonyms. Your blood pressure will be better. You'll find it easier to lose weight, less likely to gain weight if you have better blood fluidity. I already mentioned diabetes and its complications decreased by a better Methuselah factor, less arthritis, and some of you sitting here are quite young. My superior powers of discernment tell me that some of you are much younger than you look. Maybe that didn't come out the best way. And the point is, no matter what our age is, not only can we prevent age-related deterioration, but even in young, fit people, they've shown this in athletes. If an athlete improves his hemorrheology, if an athlete improves her Methuselah factor, they will perform better. They will have greater muscle strength, better endurance. How many of you think this is important? This is important stuff. So again, the first 10, 12, 13 chapters of the book, I'll go through this. I'm going to just show you a few slides that let you know how important this is. And then we're going to focus most of our attention on what we can do to improve our Methuselah factor. I'm going to give you 10 practical things you can do before you leave. Well, you won't be able to do all of them before you leave, but before you leave, I'll tell you about all of them, okay? So, let's go ahead and give you some examples. So the first one is stroke. The reason I'm showing you this one is it just illustrates some of the things that determine blood fluidity and also kind of makes the case that I've been making. So this is not just papers that were published yesterday. This is a science that's been known about but largely not talked about in medical circles. And this is actually from a journal exclusively devoted to the topic, Clinical Hemorheology and Microcirculation. And back over 20 years ago, they found, you can see it here, 297 patients who had evidence of blood flow problems to their brain, so bad that they'd either had a stroke or a TIA. You may be familiar with that. TIA looks just like a stroke, but resolves completely, usually within a matter of minutes, but by definition within 24 hours. So you compare these nearly 300 people with people who have no evidence of blood supply problems to their brain. And here's what they found. They found that all the things that they looked at that determined blood fluidity were associated with a greater risk of stroke or TIA. And I'm going to talk with you about a few of these things, ask you a few trick questions, tell you a few stories, look at a few more examples, and then we'll go to the 10 things you can do. Okay? So, first of all, we're going to talk about hematocrit. Do any of you know what hematocrit is? You've heard of it. Hematocrit is the percentage of your blood that is made up of red blood cells. So if you go to your doctor and they draw a complete blood count, a CBC, and they say your hematocrit is 50, what does that mean? 50% of your blood is made up of red blood cells. What's the other 50%? Yeah, you have white blood cells, you have platelets, you have plasma, fluids, you have different proteins, clotting factors. Okay, so here's the trick question for you. What's better, a high hematocrit or a low hematocrit? Okay, now low is better for better blood fluidity. But if it's too low, you know what we call that? Anemia, that's right. And you don't have enough hemoglobin to get oxygen to your brain, okay? You don't have enough hemoglobin to get oxygen in your heart. You're going to feel weak. Your mind is not going to be clear. So too low, a hematocrit is not good. Now, how about a high hematocrit? Is that good? Well, I'll tell you some true stories here. And maybe some of you have heard about this. There was a athletic sport where many of the athletes in this sport became preoccupied with trying to artificially raise their hematocrit. Do any of you know what sport I'm referring to? I hear some rumblings. I think I heard someone say cycling. That is correct. Elite cyclists were doing illegal things to raise their hemoglobin and hematocrit. I won't mention any names so as not to incriminate any of our countrymen here in the U.S. But the point was originally, before they had the powerful drugs we have today, they would do these autologous transfusions where they'd have someone take blood from them over the course of a couple of months, let their body build up its blood cells, and then the night before the race, they'd be reinfused with their own blood cells. It's called an autologous transfusion. What happened to these athletes? Could they perform better? They could, because they could carry more oxygen to their muscles, more oxygen to their heart. But what was the price they were paying? What was getting worse as their hemoglobin went up and as their hematocrit went up? What was getting worse was their hemorheology. And the evidence suggests that 20 or more elite cyclists, young men, died either during or immediately after races. Presumably they got a bit dehydrated during the race. Their blood was already thicker. Then they had a stroke or a heart attack. Hematocrit, high hematocrit, is a risk factor for stroke. Now, the folks here were so kind as to make sure there was water up here for me. Are these real plants up here? Anyone know? Okay, well, I'm not going to actually do this here because I don't want to get in trouble with the plant services. But if I were to take the lid off this and pour this into this pot, how quickly would this fluid come out? Quickly. What do we call this fluid? Water. Does it have high viscosity or low viscosity? Low viscosity. Low viscosity flows very smoothly. How about if instead of water, someone had put up here the same size container full of honey. How fast would that pour out? What difference is there in viscosity when you compare honey and water? That's right. The thicker honey has high viscosity. What do you think you want your blood to be like as far as blood fluidity? Do you want it more like water or more like honey? Of course, water. The lower the viscosity, the lower the risk of stroke. Plasma fibrinogen, a clotting factor. The lower the fibrinogen, the lower your risk of stroke. And you probably already guessed from my illustration about the cars in Italy, if those red blood cells clump together, they're not going to flow as smoothly, and your hemorrhagia will suffer. You say, okay, so yeah, you gave us all this science. That's the biggest science lesson we're going to give you all day. Some of you might have found that interesting. Others of you are about to fall asleep. So let's make it practical with some real numbers. Just how much difference do these factors make? I'm going to illustrate it with another killer disease, and that is coronary artery disease. So this is a large study from Europe where they looked at blood fluidity determinants and the likelihood of having a serious heart event. So you can see here, if you can read the fine print, by the way, all these diagrams are in the book, but this in this particular study, they're looking at either having a heart attack or dying from heart disease. And they're looking at some of these things we just talked about. They were not looking at just small segments of the population. They were looking at nearly half the population. So let me describe how they did it. They took the population. All these people are healthy to begin with. It's what we call a prospective or longitudinal study. So you start at a point in time, everyone's healthy. They're going to measure things like their fibrinogen and their viscosity. And they divided the group up into 5 equal parts, divided into fifths, okay? They took the group with the best values, that's the lowest fibrinogens and the lowest viscosities, those are in blue, and they compared them to the fifth of the population, the 20%, with the worst values, the highest numbers. So you're comparing the lowest 20% with the upper 20%. So you're looking at nearly half the population. That's 40% between the two of them. So it's not just small groups. These are large numbers of people. And what I want you to see here, this is over a period of like 6 years. The likelihood of having a serious heart event, if you go from a low fibrinogen to a high one, it in the range of quadruples your risk of having a major heart event. Even worse with viscosity. Now, a lot of times you'll hear a report in the news. There was just a report that came out the other day talking about like increasing your risk of diabetes dramatically if you ate more French fries. Did you hear about that report? And do you know how much increased risk there was if you ate more French fries? 20% more risk of diabetes. Is that significant? It is. Here we're talking about 400%. Okay? We're talking about a huge increase in risk. If you're a statistician, you might say, well, Dr. Derose is actually 300%, but it's fourfold. These are very important risk factors. So hopefully I've given you enough data. Like I said, each chapter, first 12 chapters of the book or so, goes through one of these conditions, and we could do the same thing with blindness and macular degeneration, glaucoma, and you'll find the same determinants. You look in the research, same kind of things we've been talking about. Increase your risk of stroke and heart attack. Increase your risk of losing your vision. By the way, some of the common supplements that are used to try to preserve eye health if you have macular degeneration have phytonutrients, plant chemicals that help to improve hemorrheology. Okay, I told you I'd mention a little bit about cancer. Let me just show you one study about cancer. There's a lot we could talk about. Even though it's a book written for lay people, we try to mix some technical things with descriptions. And so we have things about different factors, how blood fluidity factors influence your risk for developing cancer and for the spread of cancer. But I'm just going to look at this study here with you. So this was a study of women who had female cancer. So they either had cancer of the ovary or cancer of the uterus, cervical cancer, you know, the opening of the uterus, opening of the womb. And they measured their plasma viscosity. before the surgery. They measured actually some other markers of blood fluidity as well. And the first thing that should come as no surprise to you is that bottom bullet point. When they measured a woman's viscosity, the worse her viscosity, the poorer her hemorrheology, the more likely she was, that's the second bullet point, to have a clot after a surgery. You say, no surprise, her blood is not as fluid. But here's the third bullet point is the amazing one. They found that when they measured their blood fluidity before the surgery, if they had good blood fluidity, good Methuselah factor, they were less likely to die from their cancer after the surgery. And people said, why? Well, here's what the authors wrote. I'll show you what they put in the medical journal, and then I'll try to translate it for you as we go along. So they said in gynecologic cancer patients, so these are women with female cancers, the combination of an increase in RBC aggregation, tendency of the red blood cells to clump together, does that affect blood fluidity? Yes, it's going to make it worse. And plasma viscosity, yes, that makes blood fluidity worse. So we're talking about blood fluidity. If those things are worse, it's going to impair blood flow properties. Well, of course. Now listen. It may then induce hypoxia in the microcirculation. So what they're saying is if the blood isn't flowing smoothly, you're not going to get enough oxygen to your tissues and the tiny blood vessels that are supplying them. And what's going to happen? Not only are you not going to get enough oxygen, that stagnate blood will favor thrombosis. That's little tiny clots in the tiniest blood vessels. What signs would you show if you had what we call microthrombosis, let's say in your hand? What could I tell as a physician that would tell me you have microthrombosis? What could I do to prove that? There's no signs. It's silent, okay? You're getting plenty of blood through your large blood vessels, okay? Plenty of blood through your medium-sized blood vessels. It's just the tiniest blood vessels. These little clots are forming there, and here's where they were worried, these researchers. They said if you have a little tiny clot in a blood vessel, what we understand about these cancers is that these cancer cells are going in through the blood, and if those cancer cells end up lodging in a little clot, they're relatively isolated from your blood flow and from your immune system, and they can set up metastasis or spread, okay? So I'm just trying to help you see really important stuff, and if you want more information, we'll tell you about some ways that you can access this material free of charge without buying the book. Of course, the most material's in the book itself, but I'll make sure to give you some information about a website if you want to see some videos we've done on each of these topics. So we want to hasten on to things you can do. We have all kinds of information about how you can improve brain health and how you can prevent weight gain or help you lose weight better. So all those slides are in this presentation. If we were taking a couple of hours, we could go through them, but we're trying to streamline this for you. We know you were got other things on your list too, but high blood pressure connections with diabetes. So all of that is in this presentation. So with that in mind, let me just mention where we need to go. And that is to 10 things that we can do to improve our hemorrheology. For those of you, by the way, that are speed readers, you've been enjoying seeing all these slides. For those of you that are stressed out by seeing slides fly by you without any ability to read them, my apologies. But we definitely want to get to the things that you can do to improve your hemorrheology. Yeah, so this is what I want to give you first. So we do have a YouTube channel. We have a number of them. But the YouTube channel here is called Compass Health Consulting. So I've been telling you about our work under Timeless Healing Insights. For over 20 years, we've run another group called Compass Health Consulting. And they actually have a series of videos called the Missing Link series. And basically this series is suggesting that the reason why people have good cholesterol numbers or good blood sugar, and why did I have kidney problems, or why did I have this or that, often they had poor hemorrheology. So the missing link in many of these connections, dementia, weight gain, is poor hemorrheology. So if you want to learn more about these topics, you can watch those free videos, or you can get the Methuselah Factor book. But I suppose if you really like to type, You could take a picture of that link and type in all those letters. Make sure you have the correct case. But I would just say go to YouTube, go to Compass Health Consulting, the YouTube channel. I think you can just hit YouTube/@Compass Health Consulting, and it'll bring you to a variety of playlists. Choose the one for the missing link. Okay? So here's where we're at this point. Are we all in agreement that this is important stuff and it would be worth talking about things we can do to improve our blood fluidity? Are we all there? You have any questions about the connections before we talk about things you can do? Question in back. Did someone hear that better than I did? Oh, this lady is a jewel, okay? If you haven't met her, make sure you meet her. And the communications director, she's going to put this link on the home page for your church. Oh, your WhatsApp group. Okay, if you're not on the WhatsApp group and you want the link, make sure you talk with one of these sisters in back. Say, I want to be on the WhatsApp group, and they'll give you the link and you can watch those videos. Okay, the other thing that you can do is don't leave, because we're going to talk with you now about how you can improve your blood fluidity. Okay? So, what I didn't tell you this morning, and by the way, we have some more of those cards. If you didn't get at least 5 of these cards, 30 Days to Better Health, I want maybe someone who needs some exercise, who wants to help. Raise your hand. Did some of you not get these cards that I passed out earlier today? Okay, there's a few hands coming up. So I want to make sure you get these cards. Anyone else need them? Raise your hand high. There's a brother up here who needs them. Okay. There's some on the back table too. So what we did, now, the last 30 chapters of the Methuselah Factor book are 30 simple things you can do to improve your blood fluidity. We've taken those almost identically and put them into those videos. So those videos, although the video series is especially for diabetes and high blood pressure, the 30 daily tasks are virtually identical to the last 30 chapters of the Methuselah Factor book. Am I making myself plain? I'll say it one more time because I know it's a little confusing. The last 30 chapters of the book are a day-by-day, 30-day program to improve your blood fluidity. We use that same outline in the free videos. Okay, so you know the secret now. So if someone says, I got to get Dr. Derose's book because I got on that 30-day program, and you can just be thinking to yourself, I don't like that person, I like Dr. Derose, let them buy the book, spend the money, but I'm going to save the price of the book because I've got the free program, and I'm going to go through it, okay? Now, sure, there's more in the book than just in the free program, but that's a great place to start. So 30 Days to Better Health will walk you through 30 simple things. I've condensed them into 10 for this presentation, so we can cover it and we can finish so that we've only spent about an hour together before I take your questions, okay? So when you go to the website, they'll have you sign up, and when you sign up, then I know some people are afraid to give their true details, and they'll put an email address like noneofyourbusiness@noneofyourbusiness.com. Well, that might be amusing, but that's the way we send you the link. So don't call me and complain. You say, I signed up and I never get the links to the videos. Well, you have to put a valid email address to get the link. You see how it works? Okay, I think some of you could have connected the dots without me telling you that. You'll get access to this free table. This is a table you can use it as a log, because each day we're going to add a different strategy, and then you want to keep each one of those strategies throughout the 30 days. Let me show you how it works. So this is kind of blowing up 3 of the early challenges, and we're letting you decide, where you're going to draw the line. So you can see here, this is day number 3, 4, and 5. You can see how it works. There's a chapter number and a day number. The chapters differ from the day numbers by 14. So chapter 17 is going to be day number 3. So for day number 3, we're going to challenge you to get more exercise. And so you're going to decide what more exercise is for you. So let's say one of you says, Dr. Derose, I exercise every day. I mean, my mailbox is all the way at the end of the driveway, and I go out there every day and get my mail, okay? Well, we're going to challenge you to do more, to increase your physical activity. So someone might say, well, I thought that was a lot, but I'm going to go and walk to my mailbox twice a day. Okay? Now, I will tell you that day number 1 of the program, we challenge people to be bold. And that means we're going to let you set the goals, but if you want to achieve something, you've probably got to challenge yourself a little bit. Okay? So if you're of normal health, walking the mailbox twice a day is probably not that incrementally a large increase in your physical activity. Are you following along with me? Okay, so day number 4, do you see it there? What's the challenge? What are we going to challenge you to do on day number 4? Eat beans daily. Now, I want to just thank you as a group. I'm especially thank Barbara Heron, because Barbara obviously had read my book, and she made sure that I got some nice I got a lot of beans in the meal. There were beans in that rice dish. There's another nice dish that had beans, and she especially, I don't know where she got the memo from. I'm thinking maybe called my wife. She knew how much I love a certain spread made out of garbanzo beans or chickpeas. Do you know what that spread is called? Hummus. And they had a nice bowl of hummus there. And I think Barbara had said, no one eat this hummus at the table. It's all for Dr. Derose. And so I enjoyed a lot of beans. Thank you, Barbara, okay? If I'm giving you too much credit, my apologies, but I appreciated your hard work. Okay? So eat beans how often? Daily. Then you can see here, day number 5, daily connect with someone about this program. Now, here's the thing I'm really excited about when I speak to churches. So, how many of you know who your health director is for your church? Do any of you know? What is her name? What is it? Nida? Is that what you're saying? Is that your name, Nida? Okay, that's the lady up in front here. Nida. Now, here's what I'm really excited about. If you sign up for this 30-day program, most people don't realize this, but you can go to the dashboard. And if you go to the dashboard, that's where you get these free handouts. We also have bonus videos there. 1 hour a week for 4 weeks. So here's what we've done. I've done it in my own church. People are watching these videos at home, and then you invite them to your church once a week to support them on their journey. So this is, and there's no charge for it. The handouts are all there. We have the videos. Now you have health professionals here like Nida and others, so you don't have to just show the 1 hour video. But we have different things. You say, I could share that better than Dr. Derose did, or we have some testimonials from people who've gone through the program. We have recipes. So it's a great resource. So when you sign up, you get access to all that. And like I said, most people aren't aware of it, and we're going to challenge them from day 5 to connect with someone how often? Daily about the program, okay? So that's, by the way, one of the most important things you can do to increase your success when it comes to health behavior change is tell someone else. Have an accountability partner. Do you know how powerful that is? So don't say, well, Derose talked about this, and, maybe I probably shouldn't be going to McDonald's for all 3 of my meals every day. He said to be bold. Maybe I'll just eat there 6 days a week. Now, whether that's bold or not, I don't know. But if you don't tell anyone, you're more likely to slip back into your old habit, especially if you're going to make a clean break with it. You said, I'm going to go for 30 days without McDonald's 3 times a day. You say, once you've told people in your church, and you're having that desire to just swing by McDonald's really quickly, you might be thinking, oh no, what is one of my church members is there, one of the people in our group. So it can be powerful. Let other people know. Okay, let's go through these 10 strategies now in detail. You've already gotten a glimpse of how the program works, but I've condensed the 30 things into 10. Okay, so day 1 I told you was to be bold, but we also say be bold, call the bank. That's in the book. Call the bank. Now, how many of you are starting to get suspicious? He said it's a free program, and now what is the guy saying? Call the bank. What bank do I want you to call? That's exactly right. It's the blood bank. Surprisingly, donating blood can dramatically improve your blood fluidity. In fact, when we were researching our book, 30 Days to Natural Blood Pressure Control, we came across research from Europe, and they compared regular blood donors who were donating whole blood 4 times a year compared to those who were not donating at all. And you know what they found? Here's the research right there. They found that even though these individuals were identical in every other respect, the only difference seemed to be blood donation. Those who were donors regularly had systolic blood pressures. The upper number was over 12 points lower, and their diastolic numbers were about 7 points lower. Now here's the question for you. If you were to go into your doctor's office Monday, and they told you you had high blood pressure, and they put you on a pill, the average dosage of an average blood pressure pill, do any of you know how many points it will tend to lower your systolic blood pressure, your upper number? Any of you know? It's about 8 to 10 points on average. So what I'm showing you here is something that will lower your blood pressure more on average than a single blood pressure drug. I mean, think about that. If you're, and I've seen patients walk into my office for the first time, they're on 3 or 4 drugs for their blood pressure. Even if you get off one of them, you're making progress. And it's as simple as doing what? Donating blood. Okay, let's hasten on to number 2. Okay, I get the message. Good stuff. Good stuff. Drink more water. Just how important is water drinking for blood fluidity? Some years ago, a doctor at Loma Linda University named Jacqueline Chan, I had the privilege of knowing Dr. Chan before she did this research, and she was telling me about what went on behind the scenes before she did this study. It was a study from the older version of the Adventist Health Study. Dr. Chan had this idea that if she looked at how much water people were drinking, she could predict whether or not they would die from a heart attack. And as she told me about her colleagues there at Loma Linda, they were saying, this is a dumb idea, you're not going to find anything. But she did it anyway. And she found something that I still find astounding. And I find it astounding, too, because many Seventh-day Adventists even are not aware of this study. What she did is she found there were actually a lot of Seventh-day Adventists who were not even drinking 2 glasses of water per day. Okay? Now, some of you may say, well, that's not surprising. No one in our house drinks even 2 glasses of water. But she compared them to those who were drinking more water, but not all that much, over 5 glasses per day. So only about 3 or 4 glasses different, right? You go between those 2 categories. And look at the difference. What you're seeing here is the likelihood of having a fatal heart attack. Those who were not drinking much water, they had roughly double the risk of dying from a heart attack as those who were drinking more. Now, you hear about other risk factors for heart disease. You know, they'll put you on a cholesterol drug. Cholesterol drugs never lowered your risk this much, okay? Just drinking water, okay? Drink sufficient amounts of water. Now, I know what some people are thinking. And you may have even turned to someone when I wasn't looking, and you elbowed that person next to you, and they said, that's why I drink all the Pepsi. I don't like the water, and I got to get it somehow, okay? And if you're not a Pepsi drinker, you know, is this Coke country down in Houston? I don't know. But whatever it is, I hear a lot of people tell me, well, that's why I drink those other beverages. Well, Dr. Chan looked at it. And when she looked at all the other common beverages that people were drinking, Now don't read too much into this. There wasn't a whole bunch of people drinking red clover tea, okay? You following along? So it's looking at typical beverages, your milks and your sodas and your juices. What do you think she found? Just the opposite. The more they drank of the other beverages, the greater their risk of dying from heart disease. So, second point, if you want to improve your blood fluidity, what should you do? Drink more water. You got it. This is just an interesting aside. Do you know, the folks were very considerate, and they left 2 of these bottles for me. Each one of these bottles just happens to have roughly 250 cc's in it. 250 plus 250, who's good in math? What does that come up to? 500, okay. And 500 cc's is a half a liter. That's what they looked at here. Do you see it there? Half a liter of water, 2 of these bottles. If I were to drink both of these, it would improve my metabolism 24% for 1 hour. Some of you already think I'm too thin, so I won't traumatize you and drink another bottle just yet, okay? But this is raising your metabolism. You say, but Dr. Derose, I hate water. That's why I have the strawberry-infused electrolyte-powered water. Well, the researchers looked at when you add, we call it solvents, or you can see here, osmotic substances, technically, like electrolytes and other things. Actually, the water did not have that benefit. So if you want to get the maximum weight loss benefits from water, you have to drink pure water. Okay, let's hasten on. You probably all knew that caffeine was not good for your blood fluidity. I don't want to traumatize you more than I've done already, but caffeine is not good for blood fluidity. There's a number of reasons for it. If you want me to talk more about it during the question and answer session, I'll happy to do that for you. Juice is also not the best choice. There's a number of reasons for that. Juice tends to be high in sugar, and sugars actually worsen blood fluidity. So let's segue from that to talking about sugar in general. And I'll include it in this section on plant foods in a minute. So let's go to number 3. So eat more plant foods. 3 of my grandparents were born in the same country. Some of you have already asked me about my last name, Derose. It was originally Derose. And one of those 3 grandparents, who was born in this foreign nation, had the last name Derose before he came to the States. Would you like to guess where he came from? Italy. That's exactly right. Came from Italy. So 3 of my grandparents were born in Italy. And I'm going to tell you about my mother's side of the family, the Puleos, and about Santo, my grandfather. Santo was born in southern Italy, and I'm convinced he never heard of any of these hot, what we call phytochemicals today. Some of the hottest selling supplements today are what we call plant nutrients or phytochemicals. And you can see several of them illustrated there: lycopene and resveratrol, zeaxanthin, lutein. These have far-reaching beneficial effects, and they're all found in plants, okay? But I'm telling you about my grandfather, Santo. He lived into his 90s. Do you think he ever heard of phytochemicals? I don't think so. In fact, I'm certain Santo never heard of a particularly interesting class of phytochemicals known as anthocyanins. He never heard of them, and I'm sure he never took an anthocyanin supplement. So true or false, Santo never got the benefit from anthocyanins. Whoa, that was a resounding false. So how many of you knew that growing up in southern Italy, Santo was eating lots of plant foods? And among the foods that he ate, my mother confirmed this just recently. I said, Mom, I don't remember your mom and dad ever being in a home that they owned that didn't have at least 3 vegetables or the products of those vegetables: tomatoes, garlic, and onions. And she says, I believe that is correct. They always had tomatoes, tomato sauce, onions, garlic. What's the point of me telling you about Santo? My point is there's a lot of people going out buying all these supplements, okay? But the most powerful supplements come from plants. Just eat more plant products. The point was Santo was ahead of his time, okay? They hadn't discovered anthocyanins when he was growing up, okay? But he was getting the benefit from them. So who knows what the next powerhouse phytochemical, by the way, they've discovered thousands of them, but researchers say there's likely thousands more that have not been discovered. So if you want to be on the cutting edge, don't read the medical journals and rush to the health food store whenever a new report comes out. Just spend your time in the produce aisle. Are you following along with me? Okay? Now, by the way, how many of you here can eat an infinite amount of food at a given meal? Can any of you just, eat, say, 20, 30,000 calories? Can any of you do that? Why can we only eat so much? What physical limitations do we have? Yeah, your stomach can only hold so much, even though, the stomach is processing food, but you can only eat so much. So some years ago, I had a contract to do some literature research for a small medical publisher, and they wanted me to research phytochemicals. And so I'm doing going through medical journals and all this chemical and this one, and you have all these health benefits. For example, if you were to study anthocyanins, you would see that they're antioxidant and anti-inflammatory. And by the way, things that are antioxidant and anti-inflammatory generally improve your blood fluidity. But you can see anthocyanins directly relax your blood vessels. What do you think that does for blood flow? Improves it, right? They activate cartilage repair. What is cartilage? That's the cushioning in your joints. So if you have arthritis, what is something that could help you? Anthocyanins. Are you following along? They have anti-cancer properties. But when I'm doing this research, I'm going through dozens of these phytochemicals, these phytochemical families. And you know what I said to myself? I said, my stomach can only hold so much. I need to eat the most phytochemically rich foods. Now, I'm going to tell you a true story. You may already realize this. I already told you, this is a review question. We'll see how many of you are sleeping. But I told you that 3 of my grandparents were born in a certain country. What country was it? Italy, that's right. Now here's what I want to tell you. Even though when I was doing this project for this publisher, I had already become a vegetarian, wasn't raised a vegetarian. I'd gotten rid of all the animal products. That was not the way I was raised. But when I'm doing this research, there was an item in my diet, a vegetarian food item, a plant food item, that I said, I really need to stop eating this. Part of my cultural heritage as an Italian, what food was it that was phytochemically depleted but a plant food? White pasta. White pasta. What did I say I needed to do? What did I tell myself? Are you following along with what I'm saying? You want to get the whole food. So I said, I need to start eating whole wheat pasta. True or false? Whole wheat pasta tastes the same as white pasta. False. And if you grew up like me eating white pasta, how would the whole wheat pasta taste? Yeah, not too good, like cardboard, whatever. But you know what? I just started eating. I said, I can only eat so much. I want to eat the most phytochemically rich stuff because that's where all the powerhouse nutrients are. So I start eating this stuff. And sometimes it take a whole hour when I'm with churches for a longer time. And the first lecture I'll give is called Changing Bad Habits for Good. And what I explain, and I'll give you the 30, 60-second high point, is that God has created us with the ability to develop new enjoyments. Did you hear what I said? God has created us how? Ability to develop new enjoyments. This is a game changer. If you understand this, I had a guy who was in a church a while back, and he wrote to me. He said, when I heard that, it changed my whole life. He said, I realized I hadn't made a clean break with some of the problem foods. If I can develop an enjoyment for anything, why not just pick the best thing? Today, I like whole grain pasta better than white pasta, okay? Why? Because your body can develop new enjoyments. So don't be afraid to make changes. Sometimes it's got to be more dramatic, a change, than just making small changes. Sometimes you never develop new enjoyments because you just keep rewarding yourself with the bad habits. That's, again, I told you, it's an hour lecture that I've just condensed into 60 seconds. Okay, we're going to hasten on. I told you not only phytochemicals are important and whole plant foods, but I want to jump to this slide right here because I promised you I'd talk with you about sugar. So, sugar worsens blood fluidity. It raises, among other things, it raises triglycerides. That's a blood fat. The higher your triglycerides, the worse your hemorrheology. If you have gout or if you're predisposed to gout, you need to get all the high fructose corn syrup out of your diet, all the concentrated sweeteners, because those are increasing your risk of gout. Gout is a form of arthritis, and it can cause permanent arthritic problems, feet, ankles, big toe, classic place, can cause kidney problems. So sugar is not desirable. Now, does that mean you have to be on a zero sugar diet? Here's what you'll get in our 30 Days to Better Health program, just like we have in the Methuselah Factor book. We say if you're buying prepared foods, look at the label. So you may not be able to read the label, but we've highlighted a couple of things. We're comparing total carbohydrates with total sugars. How many total carbohydrates per serving of this food? Yeah, 24. Do you see that there? How many grams of sugar? 3. What's 24 divided by 3? 8. Is that a good number or a bad number? Actually, the higher the number, the better. It means there's a lot more complex carbohydrates than sugar. So we say anything 5 or above is okay during the 30 days around the Methuselah Factor program. You following along? So you say, Dr. Derose, I don't need to look at labels. I'm only eating whole grain, natural, organic foods, and my favorite thing is whole grain, organic granola. I have it every morning. I don't need to worry about looking at the label. You know, if you look at the label of most granolas, you know what you're going to find the ratio is? Probably around 2 or 3. They're loaded with sugar, okay? So it doesn't mean there aren't good things in it, but you don't want to use that if you're trying to lower your sugar consumption. Okay, we have about 5 minutes because the speaker started late, 5 minutes to cover the last 5 bullet points. So I'm going to just give them to you quickly because I promised the last half hour for your questions. We can always go back, and I just want to make sure you have the 10 things that you can do to improve your blood fluidity. So, losing any amount of weight improves your blood fluidity. If you feel you got 200 pounds to lose, by the way, you all conceal your weight very well because it doesn't look like any of you are in that category. But I've had patients weighing over 600 pounds who've come to see me, okay? And the point is, just losing some weight will improve your blood fluidity. If you're an athlete, they've actually shown this. I think I threw one of the studies in here. They looked at athletes, and they had athletes just lower their body fat a little bit, and their blood fluidity improved, and their performance improved. There's the study here. This is French athletes. You can see it there. They found that when they just lowered their body fat percentage a little bit, their blood fluidity improved, and like I said, their performance improved. So the better your body composition, the better. How often should you exercise? Daily? Every day? 6 days a week? What do you think? Well, I recommend that you exercise daily. Okay, I recommend daily exercise. Now, some of you realize that I shared a statement from a famous health writer of yesteryear known as E.G. White. And E.G. White had something very interesting to say about exercise. And I thought some of you might like to see it. It's from a little book, a devotional book called My Life Today. And the author wrote, "Go out and exercise how often?" Every day. How many days a week is that? Now, I believe that today is a special day of rest, the Sabbath. Okay? Can I make a confession? Before I ate breakfast this morning, I went out and exercised. Now, there was a time in my life where I thought, well, that would be a bad thing to do, this day of rest. Well, I realized that the worst day for me, as far as how my body felt, was on the Sabbath, because I just sat around all day. And if you remember in the Bible, Jesus was out walking on the Sabbath. On one occasion, they're walking through the grain fields. Remember that? So it's nice to take a walk or something. Now, I don't know if it's 100 degrees out. That may not be the time of day to walk. I'll confess that I got out before the sun came up because I didn't really want to get out in the real hot weather. And some of you say, well, you're a wimp, Dr. Rose. It's been cool here in Houston lately. Well, remember, I come from northern Indiana, and it's typically a bit cooler there. Anyway, go out and exercise how often? Take this reference to note, My Life Today, page 136, because if you want to see the most amazing statement that I'm going to show you, it's in the next slide. If you don't want to see it, you've already been amazed enough, just close your eyes. Here it is, also from My Life Today, page 136. Morning exercise in walking in the free, invigorating air of heaven or cultivating flowers, small fruits, and vegetables is necessary to what? What is this author talking about, a healthful circulation of the blood? What are they talking about? Yeah, they're talking about the Methuselah factor, hemorrheology. And then look at what the next statement is. It's the surest safeguard against colds, coughs, and 100 other diseases. Isn't this amazing? This is the science of hemorrheology with a practical application in a single paragraph. If you're going to do one thing to improve your blood fluidity, what should you do? Just exercise more. My wife tells a story. She's told it in public, so I can tell it to you. She said, we had 3 children in our house, and they're growing up, and they bring these colds home and sick. And she said, and I think it was maybe selective memory, but she said, I never got sick. I don't know if that's really true, speaking of me. Says, and I said, well, what is my husband doing differently? We're eating the same food, et cetera, et cetera. We go to bed around the same time. And she said, he goes out and exercises every morning. So what do you think my wife started doing? She exercises every morning. And so she claims that she has much less problems with colds and illnesses because of that. Okay? The answer is it doesn't matter what exercise you choose. But if you can get outdoors, there's increased benefit from outdoor exercise. If it's 100 degrees out and sunny, you may be better off on your treadmill. Okay? We don't want you to collapse from the heat. If you can't walk, okay, you can still benefit from hand grip exercises. We have a hand grip protocol in our programs. Most of you probably have heard that it's not best to smoke. If you needed one additional reason, stop smoking. If you want to have the best blood fluidity, smoking is a powerful risk factor for dementia. So just keep that in mind. The team upstairs told me I've become a great master at hitting this magic key that returns us to the beginning of the lecture. So I don't know if you guys want to hasten us down to number 8. Probably maybe 10 or 12 slides from the end, maybe a few more than that. Can you help me out with that? Okay. So they're speeding us down. You've gotten down to number 6, which is not smoking. Number 7, I think when I summarize them, I put get adequate sunshine, vitamin D, year-round. Here in Houston, you can make vitamin D year-round, so you can do that. Also on my final list, one of you caught me in the bathroom after lunch, okay? And some people wonder why I carry all this stuff around with me, but in my bag is actually my toothbrush and dental floss. If you want to have optimal blood fluidity, you have to take care of your teeth. If you don't like your dentist, it seems like that's the majority of people in my experience. It's amazing, as a primary care physician over the years, how much bad dental health I've seen. But you have to take care of your teeth, even if you don't like the dentist. Find a different dentist, okay? You say, I've already been to 10 of them. Well, go to the 11th one, okay? Find someone that you like. And the bottom line is take care of your teeth. If you have disease of your gums, you will have worse blood fluidity. And the last one on the list is to manage stress. And that's why I closed my presentation this morning with Philippians 4, because God wants to give us rest. Okay? Now, I promised some time for your questions. Do we have an extra mic that someone could take around if we have questions so everyone could benefit from the question? Is there a color up here that's better than another? Okay. The green one? The orange one? Okay. Green one? Okay, so green microphone. All you got to do to ask a question is get the attention of someone. And now you can look at this picture about controlling stress. Let me just tell you the story behind this, and then we'll hear the first question. I was filming some educational programs, and I actually was staying with the producer at a spare room, and his children were in the home. I said, he had all these pictures. I said, show us a picture here that you think looks something like really stressed. And they said, this boy looks really stressed. And to this day, I still can't figure out why they thought this boy was really stressed. All I could figure is maybe their mom told them to only drink water. And they were trying to figure out how a boy with 3 straws in his mouth could just suck out of the water. That would be stressful, I guess. Question?
Okay, so my question is, you mentioned on point number 1 was to donate blood more. So what if you're not able to donate blood?
Very important question. So, in the old days, they would use different terms for people that they wouldn't take their blood from. But now today, they do not exclude anyone. They just defer them, at least many of the blood banks. So what that means is blood banks realize that the criteria for blood donation change over time. So you may have been in 10 years ago and they said, oh, we're never going to take your blood. Well, you go in today and they say, oh, no, we can take that blood now. Now, there's still a variety of reasons why they will not take your blood. If your hemoglobin is too low, your hematocrit's too low, they will not take your blood. But you can raise your hematocrit by, better diet. Let me give you an example. So some of you heard earlier today that I have a weekly radio show. The show is called American Indian and Alaska Native Living. A lot of you say, now that's really weird. What is he doing with that? Guy just told us he was 3/4 Italian. I have no Native American blood, but you may have, if you were listening very perceptively to my introduction earlier today. I worked for over a decade in Oklahoma. And some of you know historically what Oklahoma was called. You know, it was before it was a state of Oklahoma, you know what it was called? Indian Territories. That's where they forcibly relocated a lot of Native Americans. So they brought them to Oklahoma. Well, we had a very successful program with diabetes, and we were working with a lot of Native American tribes. We ended up traveling throughout the country. Tribal leaders would come. They'd want us to do programs in their communities. And so a Native American leader in the Seventh-day Adventist Church over 20 years ago wanted to start a radio show. I had some radio background. We were doing some radio work back then, and he invited me to be the host of this show. So it's a health-themed show. Although our target audience is especially Native Americans, it actually, think about it. We're talking about health. Most of the things we talk about apply to everyone. Yeah, we may have certain Native health experts or things, but we're talking about a lot of things applicable to everyone. So you say, well, what does all this have to do with this question? Well, a few years ago, I interviewed the doctor who runs the blood banks. You may have even donated blood here. There's the same organization runs the Texas Blood Institute, the Oklahoma Blood Institute, and the Arkansas Blood Institute. You heard of that organization? Texas Blood Institute, sound familiar to any of you? But if you've gotten a transfusion in Texas, the blood may have come from them. It could have come from the Red Cross. There's other variety of organizations, but it's a big blood bank. So I was interviewing this physician, and he runs the blood bank. And I was asking him about a condition they used to refuse to take people's blood for. It's something called hemochromatosis. Now, you may not have heard of hemochromatosis, but in an audience this size, there's probably at least 3 or 4 of us that have the gene for hemochromatosis. Now, you have to have 2 copies of the gene to have significant problems, but people with hemochromatosis, their hematocrit goes up very high. It dramatically increases the risk of heart attacks and strokes and diabetes and a variety of things. So in the old days, we used to say, you have hemochromatosis, you got to have blood drawn. You have to have blood removed from you. And in the old days, they used to say, oh, we can't take your blood and put it, but we will charge you to take your blood from you and throw it away. But when I talked with this fellow who now runs blood banks in this part of the country, he said, oh, no, now we'll let you donate blood and we won't charge you for it, okay? So I'm just giving you an example of something that in the past where they wouldn't take your blood and now they will. And even better, they won't charge you to take your blood and help you, and you can help your community too, because the blood was fine. You just had too much of it. Okay, so what I would just say, that's why our day 1 challenge is call the bank. Find out where the blood bank is, make an appointment. That's the only thing you have to do in that category. So every day in the 30-day program, we add something new. Sometimes it's something you have to do once a week, sometimes something you do every day. But for day 1, you only have to do it once in the 30 days. You could check that off. You just have to call the blood bank. Maybe you make an appointment. Maybe you go in and you do the survey and they say, no, I'm sorry, you lived in England for 10 years when they had mad cow disease and we're still not taking that blood. Maybe that's going to change too down the road. But anyway, next question. We have a mic in someone's hand. All you got to do is get the attention of my brother back here. There's a hand over here that I see. And once you have the mic, you can just ask away.
Doctor, I wanted to ask you about sparkling water and flavored water. Is that acceptable?
Okay, is sparkling water and flavored water acceptable? Well, I'll tell you another true story. You've heard about my family. I'll tell you about my wife's family. My wife's name is Sonia, S-O-N-J-A, and she was named after a famous figure skater. Do any of you ever heard of a famous figure skater named Sonia? Yes, yes. Those of you that might be older than others in the room have heard of a Norwegian figure skater named Sonia. My wife's father was born in Norway, so she's half Norwegian from her father's side and has some Scandinavian blood on her mother's side. And you say, well, what does all that have to do with sparkling water? Well, it's because some years ago we were invited to give some lectures in another part of Europe, and we decided we'd fly into Denmark and meet some of Sonia's family. One of her cousins is a physical therapist in Denmark, and we were actually staying with them for several days. And while we were there, he pulls this contraption out of the kitchen, and he got this glass bottle of water, and he starts pumping it. I go, what are you doing? He says, I'm carbonating the water. You know, in Europe, they're really into their carbonated waters. You know, some of the wells are already carbonated, but he was carbonating his own water. And it's been a while since I've looked at the research, but I've not found any major issue with carbonated water. So if it helps you to drink carbonated water, that's okay. I will tell you one of my travel hacks. Sometimes I get in a situation where I don't have a vehicle and I'm traveling and I end up in one of these hotels and the only water is the water from the tap. And sometimes it tastes pretty nasty. So I've noticed on a lot of the flights, you know, they'll give you a little can of soda. And I found if I mix some of that club soda with some bad tasting water, I can get it down, okay? Now that isn't what I do at home, but I'm just saying, here's the reason I illustrate it that way. Do the best you can, okay? The purpose of what I call the Bible health message is not to discourage everyone, okay? It's not to stress you all out. It's not so you point fingers at one another. It's to say, real Christian standpoint, ask God what he wants you to have different in your life. And if he shows you something, if you caught my message earlier, he's going to give you the strength to do it. He's not going to convict you about something that you can't do. But don't let someone else convict you, okay? Because they can't. Got another question here if someone else hasn't already gotten your attention. Got a couple of hands up over here.
Having beans daily, a variety of beans, is strongly recommended. Nonetheless, there are a number of people groups whose main source of protein is beans, yet their rate of diabetes is very high. Is there an explanation for that?
Okay, yeah, let's talk a bit about this. A very interesting question. So I've already told you, I work a lot with Native Americans. If you know much about Native Americans, whether you're in the Southwest or the Northeast, many Native Americans had a historical tradition of valuing what they call the three sisters, which are corn and beans and squash. Beans are one of the most powerful foods to lower cholesterol and to stabilize blood sugar. But if you look at how Native Americans were eating before Europeans came to this continent, there was something they weren't eating with their beans that many people in America today make sure they have plenty of when they're cooking their bean dishes. What is it that Native Americans historically never used in their cooking? Do any of you know? Yeah, it was fried foods, okay? Adding fat to their foods. So what happens is fat is probably the single worst thing for your diabetes and your blood pressure, even worse than sugar, especially the animal fat, okay? And you know, if you go out to some places in Indian country, actually, true story, I was speaking for one of the tribes in Tucson, and speaking to tribal health workers there, and one of the guys that worked in that tribal health clinic, he said, we have the turquoise wall of death in our store. The turquoise wall of death. In their store, in their native grocery store, in turquoise containers was the lard, okay? Native Americans never had pig fat. They didn't eat that, okay? They didn't eat sheep fat or cow fat or any of that stuff, okay? When you add all that fat to the beans, yeah, the beans are good, but all the fat is bad. Okay, do you see how that works? Now, that doesn't mean you can't use some, I already confessed that I, enjoyed the hummus. I'm sure they put some probably olive oil in that hummus, and I don't recommend you try to find how much olive oil you can consume. But my point is simply this. Plant foods, whole plant foods, are the real powerhouses when it comes to reversing disease, and beans are especially powerful. Do we have another question over here? Do you have the mic? Perfect.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on taking Celtic salt along with drinking water?
Okay. So in our blood pressure book, we talk quite a bit about sodium and blood pressure, especially sodium chloride. And it is true in some of the research, there are some people that are not very sensitive to salt. But for many people, one of the things that's raising their blood pressure is salt consumption, sodium chloride. Now, it's true, if you use Celtic salt or Himalayan salt or sea salt, you'll be getting some other trace minerals and other things that aren't in just the plain table salt. But you're still getting a lot of sodium chloride. Most people benefit from having less salt rather than more, okay? Most people. Occasionally I will see someone who we recommend has a little bit more salt. Maybe their blood pressure runs very low. Maybe they have other problems with maintaining their blood flow to their brain because when they change position, they tend to pass out. We say we've got to get your blood volume up. If you hold on to more sodium, you hold on to more water. For most people, that's not beneficial. And so generally we're discouraging people from trying to eat more salt, but occasionally there may be a reason why. And we don't say you can't be on a zero salt diet. If you're on a zero salt diet, you will die. Okay? You have an absolute need for sodium. And so you have to eat some, but it's in our foods naturally. And if you're eating, well, let me give you this, because I didn't give you this in the talk. We have another label reading trick. If you're trying to lower your blood pressure or decrease your sodium consumption, we say, look at your labels. If it doesn't have a label, don't worry about it. Fruit, vegetable, eat all those you want. But if it has a label on it, look at two other things on the label. And that's the calories and the milligrams of sodium. And what are you going to do with those numbers? Do any of you know? So let's say it's 200 calories per serving. What number are you going to look for if we're going to say it's a good food as far as keeping your sodium low? So less than or equal to the number of calories you want the milligrams of sodium to be. Okay, so let me give you a practical example. Let's say you've got some corn chips, okay? And you look on the side of the bag, and it says 120 calories per serving. How many milligrams of sodium do you think are going to be in the average corn chip? Remember, so if it's 120, that's the number of calories or more, it's going to be a high sodium food. How many milligrams do you think will be in there of sodium? Want to guess? 250. Any others? 120 calories. How many milligrams of sodium? On average, probably 60 or 80. Most corn chips are a relatively low sodium food. Now, if you're not already struggling a little bit, now you go to the breakfast aisle and you get some corn flakes. And you look on the side of the corn flakes and it says 120 calories per serving. How many milligrams of sodium are going to be in a typical cornflakes box per serving? That's going to be like 240, okay? So corn flakes that don't taste that salty often have much more sodium than the corn chips that do. The reason I give you that illustration is you have to read labels if you want to keep your sodium intake down. Look for foods less milligrams of sodium than calories. Eat lots of fruits and vegetables and whole grains. Okay? Okay, did they take the mic from you? Okay, just for those of you who are wondering, I said we'd go about a half an hour with the questions and answers, and some of you say, but Dr. Derose, you're not keeping time all that well. I am, actually. We started about 10 minutes late. So we're going to have about 10 more minutes for your general questions. I'm not going to rush off immediately if some of you have individual questions or want to visit with me, but about 10 more minutes of general questions.
So I guess the safest practice would be stay away from anything that's in a box or carton or package, basically.
Okay, so here's what we're trying to do. Yeah, so she said, well, if we can cook everything from scratch, wouldn't that be the best? And yes, especially if you're using good recipes, but I realize that we live in a place, most of us, called the real world. Do any of you know where that is? The real world, have you been there before? So I'm on the road a lot. And it's true when I'll go, like I was in the grocery store when I arrived here, because it's one of my first stops, because I try to avoid eating out so much. And so I'm buying things. I'm buying, I was looking for some whole wheat bagels, couldn't find any. Sometimes I'll pick some of those up. What did I pick up? Well, I picked up some fresh fruits. Sometimes if I'm on the road for a while, I will pick up like a vegetarian burger or something like that. And, some whole wheat bagels and some kale or, carrots or, things like, but my point is simply this. Sometimes you got to just do the best you can with the limitations you have. And so don't feel bad about doing the best you can, okay? But when I'm traveling, I often can't, cook from scratch when I'm on the road with limited time. So I'm either eating in a restaurant, which if you really want to get a lot of sodium, that's another really good place to go, is in the restaurant, okay? I sometimes joke with my wife and I say, I'm so glad we came to this restaurant. I know I will not have low blood pressure the whole time we're here. Okay. So do we have any final questions in the last, 8 or 9 minutes? Right here. Do you have a question?
First,
Orange
thank
mic.
you for being here. And about the blood donor, we sponsor blood donation here every 3 to 4 months per
You
year.
here. You have
Yes.
blood donation here at
Yes,
this church.
yes,
Oh, that's
yes.
amazing. That is great.
And also, my question is, there is a famous hype going on right now about the pink salt with regards to reducing your weight. Is there any evidence-based practice about this? Because even Oprah, the famous talk show, they're advocating for pink salt in order to lose weight.
So I haven't heard this one yet. Pink salt or pig salt?
Pink salt,
Like the color?
yes,
Like,
and reducing weight.
yeah, like Himalayan salt. Well, so here's the interesting thing. So, I mentioned this already. So where salt goes, water goes. So basically, it's true. I mean, and salt, if you eat a lot of salt and get very, and hold on to a lot of fluid, it may affect your appetite. But I've not, I have to look into this. This is one of the advantages of, having a question and answer session, because sometimes I'll get questions like this. I haven't seen anyone recommending that to lose weight, and I'm just trying to think out loud with you. If you're retaining more fluid, that may have some effects on suppressing your appetite, but I can think of better ways to suppress your appetite than drinking salt water. By the way, just drinking water, this is worth mentioning. Many people misperceive thirst as hunger. So if you sit down and you're thirsty, you are much more likely to overeat. One of the things that's true, if you're drinking more sodium, that will stimulate you to drink more water too. So again, hydration is a factor when it comes to overeating. So really try to make a concentrated effort of drinking plenty of water between meals, and you will find that you're less likely to overeat. The other thing about it is if you drink your calories as beverages, so beverages, as far as their caloric content, have far more calories than the amount of satiety they give you when compared to whole plant foods. Let me make that easier to understand. If I were to give you 3 apples and say, here, eat these 3 apples, would that fill you up quite a bit? Yes, it would. If I took those 3 apples and made it into apple sauce, you think it would fill you up less or more? Will tend to fill you up less. If I took those 3 apples, gave you the same number of calories as apple juice, same amount of calories as those whole apples, how much satisfaction would you get from the apple juice? Far less. It's actually been studied, so studies looking at it. So here's my point. Whole plant foods are the powerhouses when it comes to nutrient density. They're the powerhouse foods when it comes to what? When it comes to satiety, giving you satisfaction between meals. And also, as our good team upstairs has done, they put up this slide for us, because not only can juices raise blood sugar, but they have this downside. And I'll bring this back to the salt water question in a minute. If you don't chew your food, if you drink your calories, you're depriving yourself of something called urogastrone. It's a compound made in your mouth when you chew your food. It's also known as epidermal growth factor. It's very healing to the stomach. And there's a good chance if a new patient comes into our clinic, a very good chance that that patient will already be on an acid-blocking medication. Either one of these drugs, like, Prilosec or pantoprazole or omeprazole, these acid-blocking drugs, or famotidine like Pepcid. So they'll come on one of these drugs. And I believe that we're seeing such a problem with digestive health because so many people say, hey, Dr. Derose, many people tell me this. Dr. Derose, I've got my breakfast all figured out. You know, I just throw everything into the blender and whiz it up, and I just take it with me on my way to work. Well, yeah, you're going to get a lot of nutrients in that smoothie, but you're not chewing it. And it's actually hard on your digestive system. So you say, well, what does all that have to do, coming back to the Himalayan salts and pink salt water? Did I get the terminology right? It has to do with this thing that we need to drink adequate fluids. The best thing to drink is water. If you drink more smoothies, you'll get water with a lot of calories, which may not help your weight. If you drink pink salt water, you won't get any calories. It'll hydrate you, it'll make you thirstier, and that might help curb your appetite, but the sodium is going to tend to raise blood pressure and make you more prone to swelling. Okay, I have time, I think, for one more question.
We're here.
Okay, go for it.
If you're already drinking water or not, and you have a tendency to eat a lot of salty, fatty chips or whatever it is, does drinking water flush things out of your system?
That's a very good question, very interesting question. So, your body cannot make urine that has no sodium in it. So let me say it another way. Every time you go to the bathroom, you're losing some sodium. So if you drink a lot of water, that will help to flush sodium out of your system. So this is amazing to many people. I've seen patients, they come in with swelling of their legs. They don't have kidney problems, they don't have heart problems. Now realize, many of the people that do have leg swelling, it's because they have a heart or kidney problem. You following along with me? So these are healthy people, no kidney problems, no heart problems, and they have leg swelling. You know what they need? They need to drink more water, okay? And that water helps to flush out the extra sodium. Now here's the problem. If you drink too much water, and I'll tell you what too much is in a minute, you can flush out so much sodium that you get something called dilutional hyponatremia, and you can actually die, okay? So you say, oh boy, how much is that? If you're not on medicine, the research indicates it would take you 4 or 5 gallons of water a day. Now, if you're out running a marathon in 100 degrees, it may take much less than that, okay? You're losing sodium in your sweat and things like that. Are you following along? But my point is, you've got a big margin of safety. Water drinking does help to decrease sodium in the blood. Do we have one last question? Is that young man trying to help you out by raising his hand? You have your own question, or you're helping out one of your relatives there? We got one in back here. We'll try to get both these in for you. Go ahead.
I have an addiction to saltine crackers. Is that harmful to my body?
Okay, so the question is an addiction to saltine crackers. Now,
Every day.
every day. So here's what I would say. Definitely a source of white flour, so it's a low nutrient substance. It's also a fair amount of sodium. So I would think on the order of good food choices, it's not high on the list. I could think of a whole lot of things that are worse, okay? Now, having said that, this is a great question, because this is what we want all of you to do. You look at your lifestyle and ask the Lord if He's asking you to do something different. If you really have an addiction with something, and if you stay by after our questions, I'll tell you one last story about myself, about something that I had an addictive relationship with that will help answer your question. But sometimes the only solution with an addictive relationship, often the only solution, is to make a clean break with it, okay? Eliminate it completely if there's really an addiction there. So if the Lord's calling you to do that, He'll give you the strength to do it, okay? I'll tell you more about it, but I want to, there was one last question here, right? This young man, what is your question?
Is juice healthy for you?
Okay, I'm glad you asked the question, is juice healthy for you? And here's why I'm glad you asked. For most people, it's better to eat the whole food than to drink the juice, okay? So instead of drinking the apple juice, eat the whole apple. Instead of drinking the orange juice, eat the whole orange. But now let me tell you this. If you're thin and you're having trouble maintaining your weight, we'll sometimes have people before their meal, maybe a little before, have some juice. Or in your case, maybe you could have it with your meal. Usually we discourage that because some people, when they're drinking with their meal, they don't chew their food as thoroughly. But for people having trouble to maintain their weight, we sometimes do have them use juice. But most people are having the opposite problem. Okay, so good question. You're going to squeeze one more in before I give this illustration. He's going to dismiss us, and you'll have another illustration. Go ahead.
You mentioned 10 tips, but I only have 9.
You only got 9?
Yes, I only have 9. Can you run through those right quick?
Okay. Can you? How fast can you advance us?
Donate whole blood, drink more water, eat more plant food, achieve and maintain ideal weight, exercise daily, stop smoking, adequate sunshine, dental hygiene, manage stress. What was I'm missing one.
I think you were sleeping through one of them. You were all sleeping through the most important one. You know what it was? Sleep more. Okay. Get adequate sleep. I was just playing with you. But that's the one. That is the one that we didn't cover. So get adequate sleep, okay? You weren't sleeping. You were all awake. I know. Okay. So we have to finish up because I don't want to undermine my credibility. You know, I told you when we'd be finished. There's number 8. See, get adequate sleep every night. And so it's been a pleasure to be with you guys. I'll tell you a final story about one of my bad habits that I felt was an addiction for me. If you want to stay by for the bonus 10-minute or less story. But we need to dismiss for the rest of you who've been patient. And are you going to have some closing words of wisdom?
First of all, I would like for us to show our appreciation for Dr. Derose and his sharing of all of this wonderful knowledge to help us to make positive changes for the better. Dr. Derose, thank you. The veracity of that is that nobody is moving. They want to hear this story, and I've only came up here because I just want to give you a break, and I don't want to just draw on your good graces too much. But we want to thank you so much for coming and sharing with us so much that is of value to us. I cannot say more than what Dr. Derose has said. It speaks for itself, that the Lord has brought him here for us. And we pray that this will not be the last time that you visit us. I hope that you'll be back. You could fit us in your schedule. You heard the affirmation of that. So please keep us in mind when we call again. All right? I'd just like to close the program out now with a word of prayer, and then you'll be free to speak with Dr. Derose after the closing prayer. Shall we stand? Father in heaven, as usual, Lord, you have blessed us more than we anticipated or could understand or know. Please continue to reveal yourself to us, Lord, in all your love, grace, and mercy. And with your truth that will enable us, Lord, to follow you as you have so exemplified yourself, Lord, when you were here, in your word, by your spirit. Thank you for Dr. Derose, Lord, and his ministry to us this day. Thank you for making this Sabbath very special for all of us. Bless us now as we conclude this meeting. And please be with us now as we continue on in the observance of this wonderful Sabbath day. Thank you, Jesus. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Okay, so if you need to leave, please slip out. But for those who want to hear the last, I'll tell you this last personal story. Then I've got, if they let me, I'm going to stake out the front here when I'm finished lecturing if you want to come up and ask me individual questions. So I'm going to tell you about, God got my attention as a young man. I was an agnostic when I went away to college, didn't know if God existed. And God got my attention about the Bible. I was sharing with someone. It was through the books of Daniel and Revelation. And I said, these books, have to be inspired. They're not just stories. They're real. There's a real God. And so God started getting my attention, and he started convicting me about my own health. Now, my parents, they tried to raise me, with good habits, but, you sometimes make bad decisions along the way. This was not on them, but I ended up with a really bad problem. And that is I could not go to sleep at night unless I did something. It wasn't drink alcohol, wasn't take sleeping pills. It was eating sweets. I had to have ice cream or cookies or cake, okay? Some of you might think this is terrible. If you told me this first, we would have left. We thought we were talking with someone who was healthy. No, I had a very bad lifestyle. I grew up in the Chicago area, and in Chicago, I learned that they were keeping track of my lifestyle. Many people were surprised. Actually, me, because there was one of my favorite restaurants. When I first started going there, it said something like hundreds served, and I noticed the more I went there, then it changed to thousands and then millions. Some of you may know it was McDonald's, okay? And so I was eating in the fast food restaurants, eating all those desserts before I went to bed. And so the Lord's getting my attention and letting me know I'm supposed to change my lifestyle. He wants to help me. And so I had this problem with the sugar, so what do you do? Now, I don't know how he helped me to see this, but I realized for me it was not going to be enough just to cut down. I had to make a clean break with the sugar because I was just eating so much of it. In fact, some of my worst memories of childhood, growing up with 4 siblings, is when my parents would entertain. They always would serve desserts to their guests, and us kids were in bed. And I'd look forward the next morning. What was I going to have before breakfast? Would any of you like to guess? Cake. Yeah, the cake or whatever they served. You say, well, how did your parents let you eat that stuff? I don't know if they just gave up or what it was. But some of my worst childhood memories were I would say, oh, I'm going to have that cake when I get up in the morning. And one of my brothers or sister would get up before me and they'd eat it all. Okay, so that's one of my childhood traumas. Some of you say, well, you had an easy life, Dr. Derose. Okay, anyway, so I'm a young adult and the Lord's convicting me. I need to make a clean break with the sugars. And by God's grace, I did that. I started reading labels. I wouldn't even eat Cheerios. They don't have much sugar in them. But anything that had sugar on the label, any kind of sweetener, so I stopped eating it. Now, 3 or 4 years later, I'm in medical school at a place some of you may have heard of, Loma Linda University. And I ended up becoming a member of a small, informal singing group. How many of you caught the adjectives I used to describe the singing group? Small, and what else? Informal. Okay, I want to emphasize that because we've already had someone who's talking about me coming back. I don't want you to expect that I'll come back and be singing for you, okay? So a small, informal singing group. We would only sing to audiences that could not get up and leave during our performance. So back in those days, we called them shut-ins, okay? Homebound folks, okay? There were people living in group homes, and we called them nursing homes back then. Are you following along with me? Yes. So one day, we're in this home. First time. We've never been there before. I'm a medical student at the time. By the way, at this point in my career, how many health lectures do you think I've given? I had given 0. I'd never given a health lecture. I'm a medical student in this singing group. We're singing in this home, and the people caring for the folks in this group home were so touched by our music that unbeknownst to us, they slipped into the kitchen. And in that kitchen, they had a large silver platter. And in that kitchen, they had some festive party plates, like balloons and stuff on these plates. They put 6 or 8 plates out on there, one for each of the members of our singing group. And onto the plates, they took and put a big scoop of ice cream. And then 2 cookies on every plate. And then as we're singing, out comes this tray. And they're passing them out to us. Now, how long had it been since I stopped eating all that stuff? Been like I said, 3 to 5 years, something like that. So I'm looking at this. These used to be my favorite foods. Now, what do you think the first thing going through my mind was? Yeah, actually, I didn't want to eat it. But here are these people, we'd never met them before. They were so touched. So what should I do? Should I stand up and give my first health lecture? Say, I can't defile my body, this would be sin for me. How many of you think that's where I gave my first health lecture? That's not what happened. I felt the Holy Spirit was telling me to just eat the food and be a gracious recipient of their hospitality. But I didn't really want to eat it. So when he thought no one else was looking, the guy next to me, who was older and wiser, he was already a physician, I noticed he did something with the cookies. He put them in his pocket. So I followed his example. Cookies went in my pocket. But what about the ice cream? How many of you think I could have put the ice cream in my pocket? No, that was not going to work, right? So I had plenty of experience with ice cream. I figured I'd just eat that ice cream slowly. It would start to melt. The cookies were already gone, and they would think I had received their hospitality. Are you following along with me? So that's what I'm doing. I'm eating something that used to be, did you catch it? My favorite food. And I'm eating that ice cream, and I'm telling you the truth. I am literally getting sick. I'm getting nauseated. It's so sweet and it's so rich that I walked out of that house, even though I hadn't eaten that much ice cream, and it was just like this amazing insight that here my taste had changed. And the reason I tell you that story is they would have never changed what we know about health behavior if I had just cut back on my ice cream. Because I had an addictive relationship with it. I don't think I've had ice cream since then. And that was a long time ago. Some of you are trying to figure out my age. It was, it was more than 5 years ago that I was in medical school. Okay? So I tell you that to say for some of you, the solution is to make a clean break. And if you do, it's harder at first, but then you'll develop a new enjoyment and you will not miss. Now, I sometimes give a whole lecture on this. I told you, we call it changing bad habits for good. But one other thing, don't mentally dwell on the habits you've walked away from. Don't tell yourself how good the ice cream used to be or how good the saltine crackers were. If the Lord impresses you to walk away from them, don't say, oh, why did I ever hear Dr. Derose? I just think saltine crackers so delicious and crunchy and salty. If you're doing that, you're thinking what we call warm cognitions. That's making you more likely to go back to it. You got to think of something that distances you from the behavior. So we say substitute cool cognitions, okay? I wouldn't be surprised if some of those crackers had, weevil eggs in them and yeah, really. Whether that's true or not, you have to think of things that distance you from the food, okay? So, and I can just see the doctors pulling the clots out of my arteries saying, this looks just like saltine crackers that have been, whatever it is, something that distances you from the behavior. Okay, that was your bonus story. If I tell you all my stories, you'll be here for many hours and you'll never invite me back. So I'm going to come down to the front row, and if any of you have any individual questions, I'll visit with you there. Thank you guys for being very gracious to me. Thank you for the fine meal you served me, the good hospitality, and the Lord willing, if we don't see each other here, He's got plans for us to be together in His heavenly kingdom. God bless you. Oh, this brother has one important question. What is that? Oh, did I not tell you how much water is safe to drink before overdosing? You have to, if you're not on medicine, it's in the range of 4 to 5 gallons that you'd over. So I had a patient who the other day was saying they drank 3 gallons a day. I was saying that's getting to be a bit much, okay? But they were still well alive and all. But we did order their electrolytes. That was just a few days ago, actually. So yeah, but it's very unusual that people are drinking that much. But if you're taking diuretics, water pills, then even a couple gallons could be too much. If you have heart disease or kidney failure, even 8 glasses could be too much if you're on a fluid restriction. But for most people, you got to get in that 4 to 5 gallon range. That's what the research says to have serious problems. Okay, God bless you. Thanks so much.